about you and the things that you have led us to understand. Bless us, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen. Before I get started, there is a question on the floor. To move prayer meeting up to the sun time rather than the clock time. So we would meet at 6 o'clock rather than 7. I know, Kelly, that doesn't suit you too good with work.
Can we do 6:30?
Would 6:30 be?
Work an hour early in the morning.
There you go. Would 6:30 be helpful? Sometimes?
Doesn't matter. I'll do the best I can.
Okay.
6:30 would help me faster also.
6:30 is better for you because of your schedule? Okay, all right. So 6:30, is that
Better for us too.
somewhat better? Okay. So we'll try to move it up till 6:30 then.
It's unanimous.
Unanimous? All right. Tonight we are on page 465, labeled Chapter 5 of How to Live, the segment that comes at the close of the book. Again, each of these chapters have been dealing with health and disease. And keep in mind, it was written before 1900. And so some of the material is specific to her time period. Our time period is a little different. But a lot of the principles are the same. And so this one we're going to be talking about children, infants and small children and so forth in this chapter. Some of it's all pertinent, but to her time period it's maybe more significant. But the principles are still there for us to understand. All right. Bob, do you want to start reading tonight?
Sure.
That doesn't ever happen, does it?
This is the first ever.
All right.
In this age of degeneracy, children are born with enfeebled constitutions. Parents are amazed at the great mortality among infants and youth and say, "It did not used to be so." Children were then more healthy and vigorous, with far less care than is now bestowed upon them. Yet with all the care they now receive, they grow feeble, wither, and die. As a result of wrong habits in parents, disease and imbecility have been transmitted to their offspring. After their birth, they are made very much worse by careless inattention to the laws of their being. Proper management would greatly improve their physical health, but parents seldom pursue a right course toward their infant children, considering the miserable inheritance already received from them. Their wrong course toward their children results in lessening their hold of life and prepares them for premature death. These parents had no lack of love for their children, but this love was misapplied. One great error with the mother in the treatment of her infant is she deprives it very much of fresh air, that which it ought to have to make it strong. It is a practice of many mothers to cover their infants' heads while sleeping, and this too in a warm room which is seldom ventilated as it should be. This alone is sufficient to greatly enfeeble the action of the heart and lungs, thereby affecting the whole system. While care may not be needful to protect the infant from a draught of air or from any sudden and too great change, especial care should be taken to have the child breathe a pure, invigorating atmosphere. No disagreeable odor should remain in the nursery or about the child. Such things are more dangerous to the feeble infant than to a grown person.
All right. So, interestingly enough, children are a product of their parents in many, 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 many ways. But then how their parents respond to this new responsibility they have can also be detrimental. And so that's what she's getting at here. Again, we're talking about fresh air, which we've already dealt with in the past, but for the little ones, it's just as important. They have the same circulatory system that we do, and so they need that air and ventilation and so forth. Not to get too much cold, though. Okay?
Mothers have been in the practice of dressing their infants in reference to fashion instead of health. The infant wardrobe is generally prepared to look prettily, more for show than for convenience and comfort. Much time is spent in embroidering and in unnecessary fancy work. to make the garments of the little stranger beautiful.
It's a good
The-
word for the child, right? A little stranger. There's a little stranger in my house. Okay, keep going.
The mother often performs this work at the expense of her own health and that of her offspring. When she should be enjoying pleasant exercise, she is often bent over work which severely taxes eyes and nerves, and it is often difficult to arouse the mother to her solemn obligations to cherish her own strength for her own good as well as that of the child. Show and fashion are the demon altar upon which many American women sacrifice their children. The mother places upon the little morsel of humanity the fashionable dresses which she had spent weeks in making, which are wholly unfit for its use, if health is to be regarded of any account. The garments are made extravagantly long, and in order to keep them upon the infant, its body is girded with tight bands or waists, which hinder the free action of the heart and lungs. Infants are also compelled to bear a needless weight because of the length of their garments, and thus clothed, they do not have free use of their muscles and limbs. Mothers have thought it necessary to compress the bodies of their infant children to keep them in shape, as though fearful that without tight bandages they would fall in pieces or become deformed. Did the animal creation become deformed because nature is left to do her own work? Do the little lambs become deformed because they are not girded about with bands to give them shape? They are delicately and beautifully formed. Human infants are the most perfect and yet the most helpless of all the Creator's handiwork, and therefore their mothers should be instructed in regard to physical laws as to be capable of rearing them with physical, mental, and moral health. Mothers, nature has given your infants forms which need no girths or bands to perfect them. God has supplied them with bones and muscles sufficient for their support and to guard nature's fine machinery within before committing it to your care.
All right, so it's interesting, God made it skin to keep us from just kind of going everywhere. Anyway, but if you think about some of the old-looking clothing, I mean, the kids, little kids particularly, the dresses were this long, even though the child was only this long. I mean, they just had a whole lot of stuff to have to carry around with them. So that's interesting.
I used to couldn't tell which was the boy or the girl when they were little. Well, I'm looking at
true.
old family photos because they were all dressed the same.
All the same, exactly. Yep, very true. All right, this side, Lenoy, Judy, you want to start in?
Okay. The dress of the infant should be so arranged that its body will not be the least compressed after taking a full meal. Dressing infants in a fashionable manner to be introduced into company for visitors to admire and very injurious to them. Their clothing is ingeniously arranged to make the child miserably uncomfortable, and it is frequently made still more uneasy by passing from one to the other, being folded by all. Fondled by all, but there is an evil even greater than those already named. The infant is exposed to a ventilated,
Vitiated.
ventilated air caused by many breaths, some of which are very offensive and injurious to the strong lungs of older people. The infant lungs suffer and become diseased by inhaling the atmosphere of a room poisoned by the tobacco user's tainted breath. Many infants are poisoned beyond remedy by sleeping in beds with their tobacco-using fathers. Woo. By inhaling the poisonous tobacco, fluvia, which is thrown from the lungs and pores of the skin, the system of the infant is filled with the poison. While it acts upon some as a slow poison and affects the brain, the heart, the liver, and the lungs, and they waste away and fade gradually. Upon the others, it has a more direct influence, causing spasms, fits,
Paralysis.
palsy, and sudden death. The bereaved parents mourn the loss of their loved ones and wonder at the mysterious providence of God, which has cruelly afflicted them when providence designed not the death of these infants. They died martyrs to the filthy lust of tobacco. Their parents ignorantly, but none the less surely, killed their infant children by the disgusting poison. Every exhalian of the lungs of the tobacco slave poisons the air about him. Infants should be kept free from everything which would have an influence to excite their nervous system, and should, whether walking or sleeping day and night, breathe a pure, cleansing, healthy atmosphere, free from every taint of poison. Judy makes me open the windows now.
There you go. Just so she can breathe. That's a good thing. In our world, we call this secondhand smoke. I mean, that's a big deal. You know, that people that smoke around you, you're breathing it too. And that's what's taking place here. It wasn't.
It's not just that, though. It sounds like it's also what's coming from their pores. So.
Yes. And you can smell people that smoke. And again, that's their pores giving off the poisons that their system is trying to get rid of. Bob?
I've always wondered this, but I've known several Adventists, lifelong Adventists, that have always maintained healthy lifestyles, and one of them is a doctor in the Greenville Church, but that have died of lung cancer. And I always wondered, is it genetic? Is it something in the environment? Did they live too close to an electrical power line? Because then you see other people, have told me their grandfather lived to be 95 and he smoked and
Every
drank.
day.
Yeah, every day.
Right. There's so many factors that come into play for disease, and particularly in cancers, that we usually don't have answers for all those questions. But to avoid as many poisons as we can is probably more beneficial than saying it's not going to hurt me, I'll live to be 100. So there's a place to put that, even though it's not defined, so to speak. Jeff?
Pastor, do you know Dr. Phil Collins?
Yes. You want to use the microphone so they can hear too?
Yeah, I don't have one.
Well, we can share.
Okay, here we go. Dr. Collins came here probably 25 years ago, and he had a health seminar. And he graduated a few years after Dr. Hans Deal. So
Right.
he had his doctorate in, health. Anyway, he said that there's a lot of factors he says, when you're born, he said, your DNA is already set. So
Yeah.
some people,
Which is what we read already.
some people
Yeah.
set for, 6 months old or 10 years old or
Right.
20 or 30. But he said there was nothing that we could do to add to that, but there was plenty to do to subtract from it.
To take it down.
So I was like, that was sensible, because, George Burns, a lot of people thought, well, there's the key to the long life, cigarettes and bourbon,
Yeah, right.
So, but yeah, when he said that, I thought that really resonated.
That's a
with
good
me.
key. Yeah, that's a good key.
It is dangerous if your house is under high voltage lines.
Oh, sure, there are currents.
Then,
That's
yeah.
right, very
Or
true.
being close to a radio station, is
The frequencies that are
yeah.
emitted. Right, yep. Yes, Roseanne?
Radon is another factor.
Yes.
Radon
Radon's
gas.
getting to be bigger and bigger issues.
It's estimated to cause between 3 to 14% of all lung cancer, this
Yeah.
says.
Yep, and that's having to do with digging into the granite of the earth.
And
Um,
it says it's the leading cause of lung cancer in non-smokers.
Right. Yeah, radon's a big issue. And getting more increasingly that your houses have to be tested for it, and removal plans put into place and so forth. Paul Dixon's last wife died because of radon poisoning, creating the cancers and stuff.
We saw them on every new school that was, and that now, as I was mentioned before about how much outside air they're introducing.
The exchange of air, right?
Yeah, I don't see as much of them, but I still think it's a good idea, and I didn't realize the statistics were near that high, Roseanne. That was good information.
Yeah.
Because I've wondered about this, because these are really good people that were very health conscious, and it's like
Sure, yeah.
more
And
than
there's
one, that's the thing.
Poisons all around us, and so as Jeff's saying, we may be given a certain length of time to live that we can't add to, but we surely can detract from it in a lot of different ways. Yes, Jeff?
I grew up in a house in Toledo, Ohio, and my brother and I, we played in the basement with all the asbestos insulation. We'd hit it with little ball bats. Everybody was smoking in the house except my mom.
Right,
And it's amazing how any of us are still alive.
right.
Because we'd go to, one set of grandparents were Adventist, and their house smelled really nice and fresh. And Grandpa Harms's house smelled like Limburger cheese, beer, and cigars. And they never opened the windows in
Right,
those
right.
houses. It just, nope, don't do it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
This was talking about.
Yep. Yes, Lenoy?
I fitted an old gentleman down in Waldoboro with a hearing aid, and he called and said, this thing's, all he hears music all the time and people talking. And I said, do you have a radio tower near? Yeah, it was about I went down to see about half of a football field from his back door.
Oh, wow.
And that signal was, pushing itself into the electronics
Right.
in that hearing aid.
Were you able to fix it?
No,
What's a frequency? So could you change the frequency?
no, not on that.
Back then.
Not in those days.
No.
They change frequencies now frequently. All
Yeah.
right. But there's a lot of things that create difficulty in our world around us. And so, we just need to be more cautious and aware to have the best and freshest of foods and airs and waters that we can have. Judy?
Another great cause of mortality among infants and youth is the custom of leaving their arms and shoulders naked. This fashion cannot be too severely censored. It has cost the life of thousands. The air, bathing the arms and limbs and circulating about the armpits chills these sensitive portions of the body so near the vitals and hinders the healthy circulation of the blood and induces disease, especially of the lungs and brain. Those who regard the health of their children of more value than the foolish flattery of visitors or the admiration of strangers will ever clothe the shoulders and arms of their tender infants. The mother's attention has been frequently called to the purple arms and hands of her child, and she has been cautioned in regard to this health and life-destroying practice. And the answer has often been, I always dress my children in this manner. They get used to it. I cannot endure to see the arms of infants covered. It looks old-fashioned. These mothers dress their delicate infants as they would not venture to dress themselves. They know that if their own arms were exposed without a covering, they would shiver with chilliness. Can infants of a tender age endure this process of hardening without receiving injury? Some children may have at birth so strong constitutions that they can endure such abuse without it costing them life. Yet thousands are sacrificed, and tens of thousands have the foundation laid for a short, invalid life by the custom of bandaging and surfeiting the body with much clothing, while the arms, which are at such distance from the seat of life, and for that cause need even more clothing than the chest and lungs, are left naked. Can mothers expect to have quiet and healthy infants who thus treat them? When the limbs and arms are chilled, the blood is driven from these parts to the lungs and head. The circulation is impeded, and nature's fine machinery does not move harmoniously. The system of the infant is deranged, and it cries and mourns because of the abuse it is compelled to suffer. The mother feeds it, thinking it must be hungry, when food only creates its suffering, increases its suffering. Tight bands and an overloaded stomach do not agree. It has no room to breathe. It may scream, struggle, and pant for breath, and yet the mother not mistrust the cause. She could relieve the sufferer at once, at least of tight bandages, if she understood the nature of the case. She at length becomes alarmed and thinks her child really ill, and summons a doctor who looks gravely upon the infant a few moments and then deals out poisonous medicines, or something called a soothing cordial, which the mother, faithful to directions, pours down the throat of the abused infant. If it was not diseased, in reality before, it is after this process. It suffers now from drug disease, the most stubborn and incurable of all diseases. If it recovers, it must bear about more or less in its system the effects of that poisonous drug, and it is liable to spasms, heart disease, dropsy on the brain, or consumption. Some infants are not strong enough to bear even a trifle of drug poisons, and as nature rallies to meet the intruder, the vital forces of the tender infant are too severely taxed, and death ends the scene.
It's interesting, even in today's world, frequently as the weather starts to get cooler, the parents will be having jackets on. They carry around a little baby that only has a diaper and a t-shirt. And it's like, if it's cold enough for you to wear a jacket, don't you think the little one needs one too? Anyway, we are all the time making comments to that effect, the way people treat their kids when the weather gets cool. All right.
It is no strange sight in this age of the world to view the mother lingering around the cradle of her suffering, dying infant, her heart torn with anguish as she listens to its feeble wail, and witnesses its expiring struggles. It seems mysterious to her that God should thus afflict her innocent child. She does not think that her wrong course has brought about the sad result. She just as surely destroyed her infant's hold on life as though she had given it poison. Disease never comes without a cause. The way is first prepared and disease invited by disregarding the laws of health. God does not take pleasure in the sufferings and death of little children. He commits them to their parents for them to educate physically, mentally, and morally, and train them for usefulness here and for heaven at last. If the mother remains in ignorance in regard to the physical wants of her child, and as the result her child sickens, she need not expect that God will work a miracle to counteract her agency in making it sick. Thousands of infants have died who might have lived. They are martyrs to their parents' ignorance of the relation which food, dress, and the air they breathe sustain to health and life. Mothers in past ages should have been physicians to their own children. The time she devoted to the extra beautifying of her infant's wardrobe, she should have spent in a nobler purpose, in educating her mind with regard to her own physical wants and that of her offspring. She should have been storing her mind with useful knowledge in regard to the best course she could pursue in rearing her children healthfully, with the view that generations would be injured or benefited by her course of action.
The first paragraph you read was interesting. Disease never comes without a cause.
Yeah.
All right. So the way is first prepared, then disease is invited by disregarding the laws of health, and God doesn't take pleasure in the suffering that we have to endure because of these errors that we have made along the way. And then yet we expect God to work a miracle and make us all better when we've been neglectful in managing the health practices that would have kept us from becoming that way. Here it's applying it to children, but it applies to all of us, no matter what our age is. All right. Either way.
Okay. Mothers who have troublesome, fretful infants should study into the cause of their uneasiness. By so doing, they will often see that something is wrong in their management. It is often the case that the mother becomes alarmed by the symptoms of illness manifested by her child and hurriedly summons a physician when the infant's sufferings would have been relieved by taking off its tight clothing and putting upon it garments properly loose and short, that it may use its feet and limbs. Mothers should study from cause to effect. If the child has taken cold, it is generally owing to the wrong management of the mother. If she covers its head, as wrong management of the mother. I'm sorry. If she covers its head as well as its body while sleeping, in a short time it will be in a perspiration caused by labored breathing because of the lack of pure vital air. When she takes it from beneath the covering, it is almost sure to take cold. The arms, being naked, exposes the infant to constant cold and congestion of lungs or brain. These exposures prepare the way for the infant to become sickly and dwarfed. Parents are accountable in a great degree for the physical health of their children. Those children who survive the abuses of their infancy are not out of danger in their childhood. Their parents still pursue a wrong course toward them. Their limbs, as well as their arms, are left almost naked. Those who value fashion above health place hoops upon their children. Hoops are not convenient, modest, or healthful. They prevent the clothing from falling close about the body. Mothers then dress the upper part of their limbs with muslin pantalettes, which reach about to the knee, while the lower part of their limbs are covered with only one thickness of flannel or cotton, while their feet are dressed with thin-soled gaiter boots. Their garments being kept from the body by hoops, it is impossible for them to receive sufficient warmth from their clothing, and their limbs are continually bathed in cold air. The extremities are chilled, and the heart has thrown upon it double labor to force the blood into these chilled extremities. And when the blood has performed its circuit through the body and returned to the heart, it is not the same vigorous, warm current which left it. It has been chilled in its passage through the limbs. The heart, weakened by too great labor and poor circulation of poor blood, is then compelled to still greater exertion to throw the blood to the extremities, which are never as healthfully warm as other parts of the body. The heart fails in its efforts, and the limbs become habitually cold, and the blood, which is chilled away from the extremities, is thrown back upon the lungs and brain, and inflammation and congestion of the lungs or the brain is the result.
A good science study here in the circulatory system. You know, it all starts here where it's warm, but yet moves out there where it's colder, and it comes back being cooled, which makes more work for the heart to try to generate the heat again and pump it out again. I mean, it's a science lesson for biology here, and understanding how that we can aid our body's function by the way we clothe it on the outside to maintain temperature control. All right, Jeff.
God holds mothers accountable for the disease their children are compelled to suffer. Mothers bow at the shrine of fashion, sacrifice the health and lives of their children. Many mothers are ignorant of the result of their course and thus clothing their children. But should they not inform themselves where so much is at stake? Is ignorance a sufficient excuse for you who possess reasoning powers? You can inform yourself, if you will, and dress your children healthfully. Parents may give up the expectation of their children having health while they dress them in cloaks and furs and load down these portions of the body with clothing, excuse me, where there is no call for such an amount, and then leave the extremities that should have a special protection almost naked. The portions of the body close by the life springs needs less covering than the limbs which are remote from the vital organs. If the limbs and feet should have extra covering, usually put on the shoulders, lungs, and heart, and healthy circulation be induced to the extremities, the vital organs would act their part healthfully, with only their share of clothing. I appeal to you mothers, do not feel alarmed and heartsick in seeing your children pale and dwarfed, suffering with catarrh, influenza, croup, scrofula, swelling appearing upon the face, neck, inflammation and congestion of lung and brain. Have you studied from cause to effect? Have you provided for them a simple, nutritious diet, free from grease and spices? Have you not been dictated by fashion in clothing your children, leaving their arms and limbs insufficiently protected has been the cause of vast amounts of disease and premature death. There is no reason why the feet and limbs of your girls should not be in every way as warmly clad as those of your boys. Boys are accustomed to exercise out of doors, become inured to cold and exposure, and are actually less liable to colds when thinly clad than the girls, because the open air seems to be their natural element. Delicate girls accustom themselves to life indoors and in a heated atmosphere, and yet they go from heated room out of doors with their limbs and feet seldom better protected from the cold than while remaining in a closed, warm room. The air soon chills their limbs and feet, prepares the way for disease. Your girls should wear the waist of their dresses perfectly loose, and they should have a style of dress convenient, comfortable, and modest. In cold weather, they should wear warm flannels or cotton drawers, which can be placed inside the stockings. Over these should be warm lined pants, which may be full, gathered in a band, and neatly buttoned around the ankle or tapered up on the bottom and meet the shoe. Their dress should reach below the knee. With this style of dress, one light skirt or at most two is all that is necessary, and these should be buttoned to the waist. The shoes should be thick soled and perfectly comfortable. With this style of dress, your young girls will be no more in danger in the open air than your boys, and their health would be much better were they to live more out of doors, even in the winter, than to be confined to close air of a room heated by a stove.
All right, so being outside in the air is good, even when it's cold. You know, very good. Good lesson on dress there. It is a sin in the sight of heaven for parents to dress their children as they do. The only excuse they can make is, it is fashion. They cannot plead modesty to thus expose the limbs of their children with only one covering drawn tight over them. They cannot plead that it is healthful or really attractive, because others will continue to follow this health and life-destroying practice. It is no excuse for those who style themselves reformers. Because everybody around you follow a fashion which is injurious to health, it will not make your sin a whit the less, or be any guarantee for the health and life of your children. Don't have to keep up with the Joneses. Yes, Doria.
Is in a way Ellen White saying that our ignorance, it doesn't matter if we are ignorant because we have to know some things. I'm just wondering, because we can be ignorant in many areas that we are not necessarily interested, and then we don't know and we sin because we don't know.
Right.
These parents, I don't think they knew that they were committing a sin.
Right, exactly. So that's why she's trying to bring out the concept. You know, use your good sense. If you're cold, then your child is cold. I mean, they're in the same temperature. So, you know, but some people have a lack of common sense, I guess. But yes, it's, you know, if we are doing things for, as she started out and even ending, for a fashionable kind of concept, you know, to keep up with the style of the day and wear what everybody else is wearing and not give any consideration to health, then we're doing wrongly, because health should be our taking care of our body. God's residence, God's temple, it should be important. Yes, Roseanne.
She also makes it sound like ignorance is no excuse if you have the opportunity to learn.
Yeah, that you should be studying and learning about what's going to make these problems go away and create them, as opposed to sitting and knitting and crocheting and embroidering and all those good things. You know, very true. I mean, we have responsibility to educate ourselves relative to the facts of life. All right. Any other thoughts? Yes.
I am remembering, that's why she said, I think it's education is redemption, is in English too. She said that because we need to teach to save more people.
Sure, right. And share that which we know that's helpful in maintaining good health. Right. All right, the next chapter we'll get to next week. Should I give you a preview about it? No, I'll let you just read it if you want to. It's relatively short, followed by 2 more chapters that are extremely short, So we probably can finish it up next week, finish this book. All right. This next chapter's, I shouldn't tell you about it. I guess I won't.
I'm not going to be here next week, so tell me. I'm sorry. I want to know.
Has to do with women's dress. We've talked about the children. We've talked about the men who smoke and use tobacco. In those days, women didn't use tobacco very much. This was before it became fashionable for the women. This next chapter goes into the concept of how women should dress themselves. And anyway, it's interesting. Again, remember, it has to do, she's writing to her time and her age, although the principles are still applicable in today's world as well, which is interesting. And then the last two little short ones are really interesting. Choosing a life companion and the brotherhood of mankind. Those two chapters, they're real short. How hard can it be to choose a companion, right? Anyway, so we'll finish this book next week and then move into Volume 3, Selected Messages, Volume 3. All right. Anything you want to share for prayer time? Things happening in the world around you?
Thankful for starting the thrift store again. Very happy.
Yes, to have things going better. Right.
It's
Very
open
true.
now?
Yep.
Good.
Open Monday, I guess, and they've had some pretty busy days. I've seen lots of people in there, and from what I gather, the sales have been up quite a bit. So I guess the people who have been kept away are happy to get back to it. Anyway, but it looks real well. They've redesigned the layout of the floor plan of things where stuff are.
But the food pantry's pretty stocked. So I was in there. I came last week and found out
yeah.
it was closed.
There's
but-
quite a bit there. Yep.
Okay.
So it's working out really good. Very true. All right. Any other thoughts for prayer? Yes, Kelly.
I don't know a lot of details, but I think Mark Balveen could use some extra prayers.
Okay.
He's really struggling.
Need to remember Mark.
Mark,
Yep. Mark Balveen. So
Debbie's husband?
keep him in your prayer for his health, I guess is the better way to put that. All right. Any other thoughts? Yes, Douglas, use the microphone.
Two older brothers is having a little trouble, I guess, with age, and one of them cracked a rib last week. And
Ouch.
the other one's 92 and slowing down. So
I'm not 92, but I'm slowing down.
thank the Lord I got 10 plus 10.
All right, okay. Very good. And Bob?
I'm sure everybody here knows that Cyril Comans is moving back to Zimbabwe. Tomorrow he's flying home. It's not ideal, the circumstances, and he needs our prayers. He is headed on a path that will hopefully draw him back closer to God without as much division. I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail, but because I don't know a whole lot, but I just know that he's a good man. He loves the Lord. He's prayed me through some tough times. I prayed him through some tough times. So I just ask that we continue to lift him in prayer.
Yep.
And then I am asking a prayer for myself. A week from today, I'm having a precursor to an ablation. They're going to go in and do a trial. Insurance has authorized it to try to get some of my back pain under control. So I'm just praying for success
Yes.
with that procedure.
Okay, all right. All righty. Well, for those of you on Zoom, if you want to connect with your microphones and share with one another prayer, we're going to kneel together here as we have our prayer time. Our Father, which art in heaven, as we've